In a distant memory, Naoto remembers meeting a blonde girl in his childhood. Now in the present, Naoto refuses to join any clubs, claiming he needs to be home to take care of his sister. As soon as he leaves, his classmates start whispering behind his back, calling him some kind of sisgan because of how overprotective he is of his 4th grade sister. Unbeknownst to them, Naoto can actually hear everything. Before he can make it out of the school, his friend Shigenobu stops him for a quick chat. Shigenobu asks if he could at least consider joining a small social group instead of a club, but Naoto insists he needs to get home to take care of things and even mentions that he's looking into part-time jobs. Just then, Yukari appears in front of them and invites Naoto to join the committee meeting. He tries to hide his obvious crush on her but ultimately turns down the invitation. Instead of looking disappointed, Yukari simply smiles and wishes him luck with his sister, even playfully calling him Oni-san before she walks away. Back home, Naoto prepares and eats dinner with his younger sister, Suzu. He serves her a messy-looking omu rice, but Suzu devours it with gusto. After dinner, as Naoto gets ready to do the dishes, their caretaker Tameo drops by for a visit, looking as annoyed as ever. She hands him and Suzu their allowance, and to Naoto's surprise, it's a lot more than usual. Tameo explains that she's giving extra since it was Suzu's birthday last week. Then, with a strange look in her eyes, she mutters that it kind of feels like she's handing money to her older brother instead. Later that night, the house goes quiet as everyone settles down to sleep. In the morning, Suzu asks Naoto to do her hair. He agrees but wonders aloud how long she plans to keep relying on him. Suzu playfully tells him he has to take care of her until she's old before turning more serious, saying it has to be that way since it's just the two of them now. This causes Naoto to reflect on their situation. Both of their parents have passed away, and they've been passed around from one relative to another. It was only last month that they started living with their aunt. Suzu reminds him of the time, and the two begin walking to her school. Along the way, she recognizes a plant growing by the sidewalk as the same kind their mother used to plant. Touched, Naoto promises to buy her something after school to make up for not getting her a birthday gift. Unbeknownst to them, a mysterious blonde girl walks behind them. But Naoto begins to sense something and quietly tells Suzu to head straight home after school. At school, Naoto is pleased to have another encounter with Yukari, though his excitement is quickly dampened when Shigenobu reminds him that she's probably out of his league. To add to that, Shigenobu shares that Yukari recently turned down a modeling offer, proof of how high above them she really is. He then mentions that a new transfer student has arrived, someone unbelievably beautiful named Satsuki. At the mention of her name, Naoto's expression turns grim. After school, the blonde girl, Satsuki, approaches Naoto and calls his name with eerie familiarity. He tries to ignore her, but she follows him persistently, even after they've left the school grounds. Eventually, Naoto stops and asks what she wants from him, even coldly calling her a garden crusher. Satsuki doesn't seem offended. In fact, she looks satisfied that he remembers her at all. She reintroduces herself and says the last time they met was over 6 years ago. Shigen admits she's been following him since the day she transferred. Naoto is clearly annoyed. He reminds her of how she ruined his family garden all those years ago. Satsuki apologizes for following him, but notably doesn't mention the garden. She says she wants to talk more, but Naoto has no interest in continuing the conversation. Suddenly, Satsuki wraps her arms around him from behind, choking him into submission. Afraid of what she might do next, Naoto reluctantly agrees to talk, but bolts as soon as she lets go, forcing Satsuki to chase after him. Meanwhile, Suzu is walking home, thinking about what kind of gift she'd like. She passes a family working in a nearby field and is reminded of when her parents were still alive and their own family fell whole. Just then, Naoto rushes up and grabs her, urging her not to make eye contact with Satsuki. When they finally make it home, Naoto catches his breath while Suzu asks who that strange girl was. Naoto doesn't answer. Instead, Suzu decides to share what she wants for her birthday: to grow a garden with her brother. Naoto tries to gently explain that they can't do that because they don't have any land, but Suzu refuses to accept that it's impossible. At that moment, Tameo peeks out of her room and offers to let them use her yard. However, she warns them that it's filthy and overrun with weeds. Naoto tries to turn the offer down, but Tameo gets the last word by slamming her door shut. They go outside to check the yard, and sure enough, it's exactly as she described. Still, they decide to do what they can with what they have. Suddenly, Satsuki appears, holding a hoe. Naoto screams in shock, and the scream is heard by Yukari, who has been trying to find Naoto's house. Naoto instinctively shields Suzu as Satsuki approaches, insisting she just wants to talk. However, Naoto throws even more cold words at Satsuki, going so far as to accuse her of possibly ruining his life. She suddenly dashes toward him, pressing her lips against his in a full-on kiss. Naoto and Satsuki fall to the ground, and the kiss is witnessed by none other than Yukari, Suzu, and even Tameo. Just when it seems like Satsuki might finally pull away, she leans in again, this time making the kiss even deeper. Naoto's head begins to spin and everything turns hazy. By the time Satsuki lets go, she realizes too late that Naoto has passed out underneath her. As he lies unconscious, Naoto slips into an uneasy sleep, haunted by the sound of Satsuki's voice constantly calling his name. When he finally wakes up, he's back in his room, struggling to piece together what had happened. Tameo peeks into the hallway and casually calls him a pervert, warning him that if he plans to make out in the yard again, she'll throw him out of the house. Later that morning, Naoto walks Suzu to school, trying to convince her that he and Satsuki aren't even friends. But Suzu feels too upset and betrayed. She announces she'll be working on the garden by herself and runs off ahead of him. At school, Yukari can't stop thinking about what she saw. She tries to shake the image of Naoto and Satsuki kissing but wonders if they might be an actual couple. By the lockers, Naoto approaches her, apologizing for missing the previous committee meeting. He adds that he'll have to miss today's meeting as well due to something urgent he needs to take care of. She compliments his dedication to his younger sister, noting that most high schoolers tend to pay less attention to their families as they grow older. Their quiet moment is quickly shattered when Satsuki appears and casually greets Naoto. He immediately scolds her for what happened the day before. Satsuki then walks straight up to Yukari and assesses her chest before casually commenting that she's aware Naoto is attracted to girls with larger busts. Naoto is horrified. As Yukari stands there stunned and confused, he quickly drags Satsuki away, muttering an apology as they leave. He brings her up to the school rooftop and demands to know why she did all of that. Satsuki seems genuinely confused, unsure which part he's referring to. Then, pulling something from behind her, she reveals the hose she brought with her and hands it to Naoto. She says she forgot to return it 6 years ago. Years ago, his family used to live in Shinshu, and so did Satsuki. Back then, she would often wander into their garden uninvited. Despite her strange habits, Naoto and Satsuki gradually became friends. They spent a lot of time together and eventually grew close, sharing stories, snacks, and even playing together. But one day, everything changed. Satsuki showed up without warning, destroyed the garden they had worked so hard on, and disappeared that same day, leaving Naoto confused, hurt, and abandoned. Now back in the present, Naoto finally asks her why she did such a thing. But Satsuki avoids answering. She simply apologizes once again, her tone strangely light as she teases him by offering her body as compensation. Naoto, flustered, scolds her again, especially for kissing him in front of Suzu. To his surprise, Satsuki only looks at him with quiet disappointment and walks away. Naoto is left standing there, dumbfounded, unsure why he suddenly feels like the bad guy even though he's the one who was taken advantage of. Returning to the building, he runs into Shigenobu and Yukari, who inform him that they've been called to the audiovisual room. Yukari doesn't meet his gaze, which makes Naoto panic. He wonders if she now hates him because of what Satsuki had done earlier. Now that Satsuki is back, he fears the rest of his peaceful high school life is ruined. But his thoughts are interrupted when he hears Suzu's voice and looks up to see her in Satsuki's arms, with a visible scrape on her leg. Immediately, Naoto assumes the worst. He demands that Satsuki let Suzu go. Satsuki refuses, smirking as she jokes that she just might take Suzu away. Naoto raises the hoe in warning, prepared to use it. But Satsuki remains calm, saying that he's not the type to hurt women or children. Naoto, however, declares that if it's for Suzu, he's willing to do anything. His dramatic statement causes both girls to blush with secondhand embarrassment. Suzu quickly explains that Satsuki didn't hurt her. In fact, she helped when Suzu tripped and fell. Suzu even convinced her to help out with the garden later. Grateful that Suzu is unharmed, Naoto eventually agrees to let Satsuki help. On the way home, Satsuki casually mentions that the garden he once thought of as his actually used to belong to her. When they reach home, they're greeted by Yukari, who's surprised to see them together. Blushing slightly, she says she has something she wants to talk about with Naoto. The next day, Naoto accompanies Yukari to the grocery store since the other committee members couldn't help her shop. Meanwhile, Suzu and Satsuki stay behind to work on the garden. Suzu, disappointed that Naoto went with Yukari instead of staying with them, sulks a little. Noticing her mood, Satsuki decides to cheer her up by inviting her to go shopping as well. At the store, Naoto and Yukari gather the committee supplies. Yukari uses the opportunity to ask about his relationship with Satsuki. Naoto immediately denies any romantic involvement, explaining that Satsuki is someone he knew from childhood. He almost confesses his feelings for Yukari, but stops himself. As they exit the supermarket, they run into Suzu and Satsuki. Suzu rushes to Naoto, clearly upset that he was alone with Yukari. But Naoto quickly calms her down by handing her a small blue hoe of her own. Satisfied, Suzu smiles. Seeing the siblings getting along, Satsuki leaves without a word. Yukari eventually says goodbye, giving Naoto a dazzling smile, before accidentally blurting out that she loves how dedicated he is. She quickly tries to correct herself and walks away, flustered. Noticing Satsuki is missing, Suzu and Naoto head home. Suzu runs ahead to show off her new hoe to Tameo. Meanwhile, Naoto heads back to the yard, and finds Satsuki there, waiting with the same soft smile she used to wear all those years ago. She teases him about his date with Yukari and even jokes that she wants to go out with him too. Her teasing tone brings back memories of the girl who once tricked him. Naoto is even more surprised to see that the entire yard has been cleaned up and that it was Satsuki who did all the work. Without warning, Satsuki begins changing her clothes right there. Naoto panics and tries to stop her, but the two end up falling to the ground right as Tameo walks in. Seeing the scene before her, Tameo's expression darkens. Clearly fed up, she prepares to unleash her wrath on Naoto. After Tameo storms off, Naoto and Satsuki get up and distance themselves from each other. The situation leaves Naoto feeling unsettled, so he invites Suzu out for a walk to clear his mind, telling Satsuki to head home. Instead of parting ways, Satsuki ends up walking directly behind them, claiming her house is in the same direction. As they walk, she casually asks if they're moving out. Naoto, a little surprised, confirms her suspicion. He admits that he was hoping this time he and Suzu would be able to stay in one place a little longer. When he tells her that his personal life isn't any of her business, Satsuki grabs his tie and yanks him to face her. She calmly tells him that she already knows what happened to his family. Uncomfortable with how close she's standing, Naoto finally opens up. As the sun sets, he explains how they ended up living with Tameo. Their parents' marriage had never been accepted by either side of the family, so after their deaths, no one was particularly eager to take them in. They'd just been passed around from one reluctant relative to another, and Tameo was simply the next one in line. Satsuki interrupts him, suggesting that Tameo might care more than she lets on. After all, she did let them use her yard for gardening. She then pulls out several seed packets and hands them to Naoto. Before leaving, she tells him that if they do end up getting kicked out, he and Suzu can come live with her instead. Later, Suzu wakes up and realizes Tameo is probably still mad at Naoto since they haven't returned home yet. Grabbing Naoto's hand, she makes him promise that wherever he goes, he has to take her with him. Back at home, Tameo finishes her shower and struggles to find her glasses, only to discover her cat has run off with them. She chases after the feline and accidentally bumps into Naoto, who had just returned home to apologize. Flustered, Tameo realizes who she's run into and immediately ducks back into the bathroom. From behind the door, Naoto gets on his knees and begs for more time. He explains that tending to the garden is now his and Suzu's responsibility, and that it'll take time before they can enjoy any harvest. He just wants them to be able to stay long enough to see it through. Without warning, Tameo opens the door, this time fully dressed, and asks him to hand over her glasses. Now able to see him clearly, she bluntly asks if Satsuki is his girlfriend. Naoto answers without hesitation. Satsuki, he says, is just a childhood friend. He firmly states that he has no plans to get into a relationship as his only priority is taking care of Suzu. Just then, Suzu enters and asks if Naoto is finally done apologizing. Tameo looks at Suzu and says that if he's serious about caring for Suzu, then he should focus on the garden instead of fooling around with girls. Naoto's face lights up at her words, implying that they're allowed to stay. Excited, Suzu invites Tameo to help them in the garden. Tameo instantly refuses, saying she has no intention of doing any physical labor. That piques Naoto's curiosity. He remembers their father once mentioning that he and Tameo used to garden together. At the mention of her brother, Tameo's mood darkens. She immediately snaps, ordering Naoto never to bring up her brother again, leaving them to wonder what their father could have done to make her hate him so much. The next day, Satsuki joins them on their walk to school. As they walk, Suzu tells her all about the events from yesterday, while Naoto quietly wonders why Satsuki is tagging along again. Noticing his gaze, Satsuki teases him, creating a carefree and peaceful atmosphere between the three of them. A few days pass, and the seeds they planted finally begin to sprout. Naoto explains that they're growing a special kind of radish that can be harvested in just 20 days. He then brings up something more serious, since he found Suzu's test results on her desk and is concerned about her falling scores. Suzu suggests that he tutor her. With no real choice, Naoto agrees, but not without scolding her and saying she needs to learn to be more independent. The warning goes in one ear and out the other as Suzu clings to him, insisting that since he'll be around to take care of her forever anyway. One day at school, Naoto realizes that midterms are approaching. Yukari offers to study with him. Though Naoto initially declines, worried he'll only slow her down, Yukari gently insists and asks him to at least think about it. She then walks off with a friend, leaving Naoto in thought. He tries not to read too much into it, but Shigenobu is quick to point out how close Yukari has been to him lately. Naoto tries to downplay it, saying Yukari is just being polite, but the blush on his face gives him away. Once Shigenobu leaves, Naoto's expression darkens. He realizes that Suzu probably wouldn't like it if he spent time alone with Yukari. Later that afternoon, heavy rain pours after school. Naoto, without an umbrella, watches his classmates leave. Satsuki approaches and offers him an extra umbrella. He asks her why she didn't walk with him that morning. Satsuki casually says she didn't want to interrupt his bonding time with Suzu. Instead, she stalked them to school from 5 meters behind. She then teases that they should share an umbrella, unaware that Yukari is hiding behind the lockers, listening. Unseen by all, Shigenobu also witnesses everything. When Naoto arrives home, he suddenly realizes that Suzu might have been stranded at school too. He searches around her room to look for a raincoat so he can go pick her up, but in the process, he spots a crumpled up test paper jammed into her closet. To his surprise, it's a perfect score. Confused, Naoto wonders why Suzu would hide such a good result. Before he can dwell on it, Suzu walks into the room. Startled, Naoto quickly stuffs the test paper into his pocket, hoping she didn't catch him snooping. Suzu casually starts talking, saying she walked her classmate Setu home because he forgot his umbrella. Naoto's expression subtly changes and his voice tightens as he responds. Suzu immediately notices the shift in his tone, but Naoto brushes it off, claiming he needs to go to the convenience store before abruptly leaving her room. Out in the rain again, Naoto berates himself for not praising Suzu, either for her high test score or her kindness toward her classmate. He realizes that up until now, he's always thought of Suzu as someone who couldn't do things on her own. His entire life revolved around taking care of her, protecting her, and keeping her happy. But now that she's beginning to grow more independent, a strange uneasiness creeps in. Across the street, Naoto suddenly spots Satsuki, completely drenched from the rain. It dawns on him that she had lied about having a second umbrella and had given her only one to him. He grabs her wrist, concerned, but Satsuki casually brushes it off, saying she must have misremembered. This only makes Naoto feel worse. It's like everyone around him is pretending. He begins to realize that Suzu, too, had probably been pretending, downplaying what she could do so he could feel useful, feel needed. Satsuki notices his withdrawn expression and gently reaches out to check on him. Naoto insists he's fine, but then notices how soaked she still is. Wordlessly, he takes off his jacket and places it over her shoulders, an act that clearly warms her. He walks her to a rundown apartment nearby and is surprised to see it so close to his own home. When she tries to open the door, the knob falls off completely. Naoto wonders what kind of parents would leave her in a place like this. Satsuki tells him to hurry back and warm up. But when Naoto doesn't move, she grabs his hand and pulls him inside. Naoto resists, saying he needs to get back to Suzu, but Satsuki argues that Suzu is old enough to be left alone. Then, without hesitation, she accuses him of never prioritizing his own feelings, of building his life entirely around Suzu's dependence on him. Naoto snaps. He grabs her shoulders and pushes her against the wall, his voice rising as he scolds her for making such claims. Her lack of response stings more than he expects. He turns away, muttering that she doesn't understand the bond between him and Suzu. Without another word, he walks out the door, leaving her standing alone. Once he's gone, Satsuki slowly slides to the ground. She blushes faintly and whispers to herself that she does know him. Outside, Naoto walks in the light rain, each step heavy with thought. His mind drifts to Suzu. He begins to realize that his world has been built entirely around her. If he stops putting Suzu first all the time, maybe he can finally start thinking about Yukari. When he gets home, Suzu immediately runs to him. She blames herself for his earlier disappearance, but Naoto gently reassures her and offers her sweets as a peace offering. He promises to come home earlier next time, and to bring her more gifts to make up for it. Suzu tears up, reminding him that he promised to tutor her, saying she needs all of his time because she's not smart like other kids. Naoto pulls out the test paper he found earlier. When she sees it, Suzu's face changes completely. She grabs it, crumples it, and throws it away. He retrieves the paper and tells her she clearly doesn't need his help with math. But Suzu insists the score was a one-time fluke, that she still needs him for everything else. Before Naoto can reply, the world starts to spin. His vision blurs and his legs give out. He collapses to the ground in front of her. Suzu panics and rushes inside to call Tameo. The next day, word spreads through school that Naoto is absent. Back at home, Suzu refuses to leave his side, insisting on staying in bed with him despite Naoto warning her she might get sick too. Naoto does his best to convince her to go to school. After some pleading, she finally relents and heads out. By midday, Naoto wakes up again and immediately senses something's off. Sure enough, Satsuki is lying right next to him in bed, staring at him as if nothing is wrong. He tries to scold her, asking how she keeps getting in, but she ignores the question and apologizes for causing him to get sick. She promises to leave right away, but offers him some medicine first. Without warning, she pulls out a children's suppository from her skirt. Naoto stares at it in horror. He demands to know why she brought that and not something normal. Satsuki casually explains that it's the same kind his mother used to give him. The fact that she remembers such a bizarre detail makes his headache worse. He tells her to return to school, but she calmly informs him that today only had morning classes. He's been asleep past noon. She adds that she had tried multiple ways to wake him up, teasing about what those might have been. Before he can press her for details, the doorbell rings. Naoto pulls himself up to check, only to find Yukari standing at the door, looking concerned. He begins to worry about his attire and, most importantly, Satsuki, who is still in his room. Despite everything, Naoto lets her in. Yukari asks to use the kitchen to cook something warm for him, and Naoto, still processing everything, nods in agreement. The moment she disappears into the kitchen, Satsuki announces that she'll be on her way, since she doesn't like being around him and Yukari together. But then with a mischievous grin, she straddles him and suggests he might actually want her to stay. Naoto freezes as Yukari calls from outside his door, saying lunch is ready. In full panic mode, he shoves Satsuki under the blanket and dives in after her. Yukari enters the room, smiling warmly as she sets the bowl of food beside him, completely unaware. Naoto lies motionless, heart pounding, wondering how he's going to move or breathe, while Satsuki is blushing beneath the covers. Naoto still can't believe he agreed to this. Hiding under the blanket had been Satsuki's idea, one that somehow made perfect sense to her in the moment. Things get worse when Yukari notices a box of suppositories lying nearby. Naoto panics and blurts out that they're Satsuki's, trying to play it off as casually as possible. Meanwhile, Satsuki squirms beneath the blanket, trying to get comfortable. She seems pretty pleased with this setup, even hugging him tightly. Naoto breaks into a cold sweat, praying Yukari doesn't notice anything strange. Yukari leans in to check on him, placing a hand on his forehead. Thankfully, she doesn't seem to notice how his temperature is rising for reasons that have nothing to do with his cold. She reminds him to eat and drink before heading out, finally giving him some much-needed relief. As soon as she's gone, Satsuki stretches out and grins, clearly proud of herself. Naoto, however, is still trying to recover from the sheer stress of it all. Satsuki watches him squirm and eventually takes pity on him, deciding not to tease him further. While walking home, Yukari starts to feel a bit bothered. Satsuki had visited Naoto before her. She tries to brush it off, reminding herself that Naoto had said they were just childhood friends. Still, it doesn't sit well. She pauses by a shrine, quietly praying for Naoto's recovery. Back in his room, Naoto changes into clean clothes and opens the food Yukari had made him earlier. He tries to be optimistic and takes a big spoonful, only to regret it immediately. It's a bizarre mix of overcooked rice and something vaguely metallic. Despite the taste, he keeps eating. It's from Yukari after all. Meanwhile, out in the garden, Satsuki tends to the plants while Suzu watches her work. Eventually, Satsuki calls her over to help. As they work, Suzu brings up her worries about Naoto. While talking, she accidentally pulls out a basil plant, mistaking it for a weed since it was growing too close to the tomatoes. Satsuki corrects her and explains that basil and tomatoes are companion plants. They grow better together, even protecting each other from pests. Suzu seems to think about that for a bit longer than necessary and suddenly announces that she'll check on Naoto. Before heading back, Suzu turns and asks Satsuki about something from years ago. She remembers how Satsuki trashed their garden as kids. She'd seen how upset Naoto was and even tried to chase Satsuki down for an explanation, but stopped when she saw her talking to a strange man before disappearing with him. Suzu then asks Satsuki who the man was, but instead of giving her a straight answer, Satsuki calmly says there wasn't anyone with her. She quickly shifts the conversation, asking if Suzu ever mentioned anything to Naoto. Satsuki tells her she was probably too young to remember the events clearly. She admits she ruined the garden out of anger. She and Naoto had a fight the day before and she acted out. It's something she regrets deeply. That jogs Suzu's memory. She suddenly remembers how she and her brother had cleaned up the garden after Satsuki left it a mess. She had planned to tell Naoto everything, but when the opportunity came, she didn't. Instead, she used that moment to get closer to Naoto, letting him depend on her, building a connection just for the two of them. The next morning, Suzu is surprised to find Naoto already up and dressed. He claims he's feeling much better and credits Yukari's porridge for curing him, though he admits he doesn't remember much after eating it. He then notices that Suzu's already ready for school, even without his help. She tells him she's trying to be a little more independent, though she still wants to rely on him for a few things. At school, Naoto tries to thank Yukari properly, but she's always surrounded or busy with something. Some guys notice him try and warn him not to get his hopes up as Yukari's out of everyone's league. She's polite but distant, and no one's ever gotten close to her. Shigenobu chimes in, mentioning that he and Yukari have been classmates since they were little. He says she's always had a knack for attracting strange situations despite her calm demeanor. Naoto realizes that being pretty probably isn't as easy as it looks. On the way home, he sees Yukari rejecting a group of guys. But Yukari notices him and walks over. Naoto finally gets the chance to thank her for visiting him. As he prepares to leave, she suddenly invites him to a study session. He agrees, barely hiding his excitement. They find a quiet corner of the library and get to work. In a moment of honesty, Naoto blurts out that he doesn't understand why Yukari is so nice to someone like him. She responds calmly, saying it's partly because he's a transfer student. Naoto feels a little let down, but then Yukari adds that there's another reason. She tells him they've met before he even transferred. One day, right before he transferred, Yukari had stayed behind to do some club duties. Wanting to change out of her uniform, she used an empty classroom. That was when Naoto suddenly came bursting in, demanding the whereabouts of his younger sister. He completely ignored her state of dress and immediately started bombarding her with questions about Suzu, After realizing she couldn't help, he left just as quickly, leaving her alone in the room. Naoto feels horrible after hearing the story. He has no memory of it, but admits it probably happened. Yukari, her face red, tells him that she actually admires how dedicated he is to Suzu. She says Naoto feels different from the other boys she's met. A lot of them seem to be after girls only for shallow reasons. She then mentions the group of guys she had turned down earlier near the station, calling them exactly that kind. She admits there are times she meets men who are too pushy, and the situation becomes scary. That's why Naoto was a breath of fresh air. He's different since he is genuine and kind. Naoto suddenly feels a chill. Yukari looks like she's about to say something more, but instead apologizes for rambling. She excuses herself and leaves, leaving Naoto alone with his thoughts. On her way out of the library, she spots Satsuki standing there. She wonders if Satsuki and Naoto had agreed to meet up. Satsuki casually says she's just waiting for him because she wants to. Yukari nods and walks off without saying anything else. Later, Naoto talks with Shigenobu over ramen and shares what Yukari told him. Naoto believes this was Yukari's roundabout way of telling him not to think of her as a romantic partner. Shigenobu disagrees and thinks it might mean something else. But Naoto doesn't seem to pick up on it and instead says he'll do his best to keep his thoughts pure. He wants to maintain the image Yukari has of him so they can keep talking. Suddenly, Satsuki chimes in that he shouldn't do that and should just be himself. Later that evening, Naoto looks over the notes he made with Yukari and finds himself thinking about her words. His classmates' comments echo in his head. He tries to shake them off but can't help imagining Yukari in his mind. He tries not to think of her, but in the process, Satsuki's face pops in his head, which to him feels even worse. Naoto recalls the blanket incident from yesterday and can't help but think how it might have been better if Yukari had been in Satsuki's place, only to realize that Suzu, who has been sleeping beside him, is now wide awake and giving him a very annoyed, disappointed glare. He freezes on the spot, then awkwardly excuses himself to go to the bathroom. Meanwhile, at Yukari's house, she's in the middle of her shower when her thoughts drift towards Satsuki's words. The way Satsuki seems so comfortable around Naoto starts to get to her. She wonders if she really is just a childhood friend or something more. Still, she chooses to believe in Naoto for now. She tells herself to be braver so that one day she can confess her feelings properly. The next morning before school, Naoto is out watering the plants in the yard, looking like a shell of himself. Suzu, who's tending to another patch of vegetables, complains to Satsuki that he's been acting weird since yesterday. Curious, Satsuki tries to get his attention, but Naoto, caught off guard, accidentally turns the hose toward her as he turns, dousing her in cold water. Stoked, Satsuki ends up on the ground, blinking while Naoto panics and backs away into a corner, repeatedly telling himself not to look. Later at school, Satsuki casually teases Naoto about his sudden absent-mindedness in the morning and how it was probably Yukari related. Naoto apologizes until he realizes something. She'd admitted earlier that she'd done laundry at his place before class, meaning some articles of her clothes may not be dry. Satsuki just grins and brushes it off, saying she'll be fine. It's only exam day anyway. Yukari arrives and greets Naoto. Naoto instantly panics, trying to claim he wasn't talking to Satsuki, but Satsuki has already started walking toward her classroom. Naoto keeps glancing at Satsuki's skirt with growing worry, which Yukari notices. Feeling threatened, she quickly makes a move. She invites Naoto to hang out after exams, even telling him to bring Suzu along if he wants. Naoto's eyes widen in shock. He fumbles for a moment, but agrees, overwhelmed by how lucky he feels. Then a sudden gust of wind blows through the hall, lifting several skirts in the process. Without thinking, Naoto rushes forward and hugs Satsuki tightly to keep her skirt from flying up. Everyone freezes. Yukari stares in disbelief as it looks like some bold display of affection. Realizing what just happened, Naoto lets go immediately and scrambles to explain, but Yukari's face has already shifted to something dark and betrayed. Without a word, she turns and bolts to the classroom. Naoto slumps to the floor in despair, blaming Satsuki yet again for ruining his chances with Yukari. Satsuki, still composed, calmly mentions she was actually using some of Naoto's clothes since hers were still drying. He realizes he didn't even need to help her at all, but she quietly thanks him for trying to protect her anyway. A week passes and Yukari has barely spoken to him. Naoto vents his frustrations to Shigenobu and Satsuki. That's when Shigenobu drops a new bomb that there's already a rumor going around that Naoto and Satsuki are dating. Naoto feels even more hopeless, especially since he was supposed to have had fun with Yukari after exams. Seeing him in a slump, Shigenobu suddenly declares that what Naoto needs is a fun distraction. He announces that they're all going to the beach this weekend, and it's an open invite. Even Yukari receives one. She initially agrees, but after learning Naoto will be there too, she starts to hesitate. Still, Shigenobu assures everyone that he'll take care of all the details. All they need to do is show up. After class, Naoto begins to worry about the upcoming beach trip. Things between him and Yukari are still awkward, and spending 2 days together might only make it worse. On top of that, you assume Suzu might get lonely or worry about him while he's away. Thinking it over, he decides to just bring Suzu along instead. But when he returns home, Suzu tearfully informs him that she has a 2-day school beach trip. Naoto hides his relief and tells her it's great news. He also shares that he'll be gone for a beach outing himself. They both pause, realizing neither of them will be home to water the garden. After thinking it over, they agree to try asking Tamayo for help. Suzu makes him promise not to forget about her while they're apart. He reassures her he won't, and in exchange, she makes him promise to take her swimsuit shopping the next day. The following day, Naoto regrets making that promise. Thankfully, Satsuki offers to come with them since she also wants to buy one herself. Naoto hesitates but agrees as he'd rather not shop for girls' swimwear alone. As they head to pick up Suzu, Yukari notices them and quietly watches them walk off. Shigenobu, standing nearby, casually suggests that she should join them. Yukari refuses, explaining that she overheard a rumor that Naoto and Satsuki are already dating. Shigenobu questions it and tells her that unless she heard it from Naoto himself, it's just a rumor. When Yukari hesitantly says she's thinking of backing out of the beach trip, Shigenobu brings up something from their middle school days and tells her she should at least try to talk to Naoto first. Encouraged by his words, Yukari decides to run after them. At the department store, Naoto is immediately bombarded by swimsuit options. Satsuki and Suzu each pick out bold pieces and ask for his opinion. Trying not to let his thoughts go wild, Naoto keeps his answers short, insisting they pick whatever they want. Satsuki playfully shows off her size, while Suzu subtly fishes for praise. Flustered, Naoto tells Suzu to pick something with more coverage, then quickly turns around, announcing he's going to look for his own beachwear instead. Unbeknownst to them, Yukari watches quietly from a distance. She feels like a stalker but can't look away. A sales lady approaches and asks if she's looking for anything, reminding her she still needs a new swimsuit too. At first, Yukari asks for something simple and not too flashy, but after seeing Satsuki's choices, she quickly changes her mind and asks for something just a little bolder. The girl picks out a 2-piece swimsuit that flatters her figure, hugging her curves perfectly. Yukari, feeling self-conscious, quickly asks for another option. The sales lady smiles and agrees to help her find something else, casually wondering aloud if the boy Yukari wants to impress has any specific preferences. A gloomy expression falls on Yukari's face as she pictures Satsuki. With a hesitant voice, she describes Satsuki's appearance. The sales lady lights up and grabs Yukari's hands, confidently declaring that she'll transform her into the boy's type as they even have hair extensions. Soon enough, Yukari is fitted with long extensions and dressed in a bolder swimsuit, which leaves her more embarrassed than before, unaware that Naoto has spotted her from across the store, but cannot seem to realize that the person he is looking at is Yukari. Naoto heads back to the dressing rooms where Suzu and Satsuki are still trying on their swimsuits. Suzu calls out, asking Naoto to help her with something on her back. Naoto casually opens one of the curtains only to realize too late that he's opened Satsuki's side just as she stepped out of her swimsuit. A deadly silence falls. Satsuki grabs the curtain and slams it shut with a chilling glare. Suzu steps out moments later, cheerfully telling Naoto she managed to get dressed by herself, oblivious to the awkward tension. Shortly after, Satsuki storms out of her booth, completely ignoring Naoto's existence. Confused, Naoto tries to follow her and apologize. He catches up and gently grabs her hand. Satsuki immediately turns on him, flustered and red-faced, throwing out an insult with an unusually shy tone. Naoto stares at her in surprise. Satsuki had always been bold and unbothered before, often teasing him and showing off. When he points this out, Satsuki snaps that it's different when it's unintentional. Meanwhile, Yukari finishes paying for her swimsuit and looks around for the others. She spots Naoto and Satsuki looking unusually close and quickly ducks into a corner. Satsuki notices her but says nothing. Later, on the train ride home, Satsuki asks why Naoto never badmouthed her to anyone. If he had, maybe she wouldn't have been invited and Yukari wouldn't have misunderstood. Naoto simply replies that their issues are between them. Half asleep, Suzu overhears their conversation and invites Satsuki to sit closer. Satsuki refuses. She's content just watching Naoto from afar, promising to step in only when he needs her. Naoto listens, unsure whether this is Satsuki's way of making up for destroying the garden or if she means something more. He reflects on their relationship. It's difficult to define, as it is too tense to be called a friendship, yet too familiar to be strangers. They had once been close as kids, but things had ended on bad terms. Even now, he hasn't completely forgiven her. They eventually reach a part of town and see Yukari waiting nearby. Without hesitation, Yukari asks if he and Satsuki are dating. Naoto tries to clear up the misunderstanding, but Yukari insists you must be hiding something. She brings up the intimate moments she had witnessed, including the kiss in the yard. Caught off guard, Naoto scrambles for an explanation. He realizes the situation has spiraled too far and any hope of forming a relationship with Yukari feels impossible now. Seeing his panic, Satsuki steps forward, facing Yukari directly. She claims the kiss meant nothing, adding that it was a cultural greeting. To prove her point, she leans in and plants a simple kiss on Yukari's cheek. Naoto nearly jumps in shock and Yukari stares at her speechless. Satsuki continues calmly, explaining that she's willing to kiss anyone as there's no special meaning behind it, not even the one with Naoto. Eventually, Yukari, though still flustered, accepts the explanation. Just then, Suzu wakes up and groggily complains about being thirsty, prompting them to stop by a vending machine. Yukari tries to convince herself that the kiss was meaningless. After all, Satsuki is a girl. Still, she's too flustered to think straight and excuses herself. Before she can leave, Naoto stops her and reassures her again that he and Satsuki are just childhood friends. He then adds that he's really looking forward to the beach trip with her. Yukari lights up with relief and turns to smile at him, admitting she's looking forward to it too. At the beach, Satsuki is stunned by the sight of the ocean, while Naoto is too preoccupied watching Yukari. In the changing room, Yukari's friends gush over her bold swimsuit choice. Yukari, though nervous, wonders what Naoto will think of it. They realize Satsuki had already left the changing room. Yukari recalls yesterday's events, and now that she's sure Naoto and Satsuki aren't dating, she dares to think that maybe she can get closer to him. Meanwhile, Naoto has problems functioning without Suzu, but decides to use this trip as a chance to get closer to Yukari. When his classmates invite him to hang out, he answers awkwardly since it's his first time doing something that a normal high school student should be doing. Naoto reminds himself that this trip is supposed to be fun, a chance to finally get closer to Yukari. But every time he tries to approach her, she's surrounded by people. Frustrated but determined, he steels his nerves and decides he just has to push himself to socialize. Turning his head, he spots Satsuki gripping a guy's wrist in an iron hold. His classmates quickly explain that Satsuki's been getting hit on since they arrived. Worried things might escalate, Naoto strides over, grabs Satsuki by the collar of her parka, and drags her away before she causes more trouble. Once they're alone, he tries to scold her for starting a fight instead of asking for help, but Satsuki completely ignores his lecture and gestures to her swimsuit. She asks for his opinion, but when he refuses to answer, it only sours her mood. She folds her arms and demands to know why he isn't spending time with Yukari. Trying to redirect the conversation, Naoto asks what she plans to do since most people have already gone swimming. Satsuki hesitates before admitting that she doesn't know how to swim. It's her first time at beach, and she has never gone with her family, and she always skips swim class. Naoto blinks in surprise. He realizes there's so much about Satsuki he doesn't actually know. Satsuki admits softly that today she at least wants to try getting into the water. Naoto, briefly lost in thought, quickly tells her she should, but insists she go with someone else just to be safe. Right then, Shiinobu appears, handing Naoto a list and explaining that he and Yukari have a few things to buy. He offers to introduce Satsuki to the other girls in their class. Before heading off, Naoto promises Satsuki he'll join her in the water later. Satsuki gives him a warm smile, which Shigenobu silently observes with curiosity. When Naoto finally meets up with Yukari, he awkwardly avoids eye contact. Yukari, misreading his behavior, thinks the swimsuit doesn't suit her. To distract himself, Naoto pulls out the list, only to find it just tells them to have lunch together. They both stare at the note, immediately realizing it was a setup. While Naoto and Yukari are off on their errand, Satsuki and Shigenobu spend time together. Satsuki admits she doesn't really get along with girls in general, so she's just watching by the side. Curious, Shigenobu casually asks if she's in love with Naoto. Satsuki admits that she is, but quickly adds that she has no desire to be his girlfriend. Satisfied with her answer, Shigenobu shares that, in that case, he'll continue to root for Naoto and Yukari. He explains that he's also decided he no longer wants to be Yukari's boyfriend. Meanwhile, Naoto and Yukari wander through the rows of food stalls trying to decide what to eat. Naoto wonders aloud if Yukari would prefer something light and sweet like shaved ice. Yukari smiles at the idea, joking about how it'll dye her tongue. Then playfully, she sticks her tongue out, making Naoto's heart skip a beat. After thinking for a moment, Yukari suggests they try something with more substance and begins pointing out options with more protein. She casually adds that they could get shaved ice later and share one together. A bit later, she returns holding several sticks of yakitori. The vendor gave her extra, and they sit on some nearby steps to eat. Naoto feels incredibly lucky to be spending this moment with her. Their peaceful meal is occasionally interrupted by passing beachgoers. A few guys make side comments about Yukari, some even trying to talk her into ditching Naoto. Yukari tries to ignore it, but it clearly makes her uncomfortable. Thankfully, Naoto picks up on it and says they should head back to their classmates. He gently pulls her by the hand. As they walk, Yukari nervously asks him to let go. He does, apologizing, and then compliments her swimsuit. Embarrassed, he adds that he hopes he doesn't sound creepy. Yukari smiles and says it actually makes her happy to hear it from him. Suddenly, Yukari hears a familiar voice. She turns and spots Soichiro, a senior from school. He approaches and chats briefly, complimenting her before taking off again. Something about the encounter unsettles Yukari. She tells Naoto she wants to return to the hotel to rest. Back at the beach, Shigenobu starts to worry when Naoto hasn't returned. His concern grows after overhearing some girls gossiping about a sighting of Soichiro nearby.